how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Good morning. This is Jack Devine coming to you from down in the cellar here. And in the eyes of the Amker, which I suppose is maker with a beautiful typo. Anyway, cheers to everybody and good morning. Maker, exactamundo. So, anybody who's unfamiliar with this song, I pity your ears for having never heard it before. And if you are still unfamiliar with it, I'm happy to be your shepherd to your initiation with it. It is such a great song. I remember hearing this song back in college when off the Acadie record, which was, I was a production engineering and songwriting kind of nerd for a long time, kind of a studio rat. And obviously, when you're kind of coming up through the ranks of that, you start to hear the names of the producers that you hear lauded by your favorite artists. And I loved U2 and Bob Dylan and the Neville Brothers and all kinds of stuff, and I kept seeing this name in the back of all those records. So then one day I found that he and Brian Eno were production partners, and he was on the Peter Gabriel albums, and I just started following Lanois. I'm like, man, this fucking Daniel Lanois guy has really got it together. And it turns out that basically the whole sound of the whole creation of the Edge is kind of a one hand washing the other between Daniel and the Edge. They both kind of employ similar setup with their gear, although I think the Edge is significantly more high power these days. He's got like racks and racks and racks of stuff, where Daniel's live rig is actually pretty sparse, but still involves the use of the Korg digital delay, which has this nice like preamp in front of it that has this kind of interesting crunch. And I used to have that. That was the first digital delay I ever owned, and I didn't realize that you weren't really supposed to put it into the front end of your amp, but that was all I really had at the time until I had a Mesa Boogie Mark II C Plus for a little while, and that worked well there. But anyway, that Korg, that SDE, I think it is what it was called, has this great modulation effect. So you'll hear that emulated here in the Kemper. It's kind of like a little extra dotted eighth note. And then there's a big cloud of reverb behind everything. And so this album Acadie came out, and the truth is there were elements about it that I wasn't crazy about, but I kind of listened to it over and over again, and then it started to kind of become a favorite. And then continuing down the road, he kept making great records and kept, and in particular, I'd say it's like the peak Lanois for me is the record that he made with Emmylou Harris called Wrecking Ball. And that album just has like a who's who of guest stars, ranging from Neil Young to Larry Mullen Jr. to Steve Earle to, Brian Blade on drums, like the most amazing musicians, all doing kind of the most selfless performances you'll ever hear from any of them. And they're just all deferential to the song and all deferential to the vibe. And all this is done down at his place in New Orleans, in that old kind of converted mansion through the old Neve console that he has there and stuff. And it's just a great album. It's just spectacular songs with Emmylou Harris's magnificent voice as the centerpiece, the focal point of the whole thing. But Daniel's guitar playing is all over it, and it's just shocking how beautiful he is as a musician, as well as a musical mind that's able to kind of corral others. And he just acted as a kind of a high water mark as to what could be done from a quieter position within the musical community to kind of foist the kind of create a big push behind some of these artists to kind of help them redefine themselves. So you look at the Willie Nelson record or the Bob Dylan records or the Emmylou Harris records, they all kind of take place at a crossroads in each of these artists' career where it kind of reinvigorates them. And similar to the way that Rick Rubin kind of revitalized Johnny Cash or some other people like that, there are producers and creative forces that kind of come together and inspire people that are not old dogs that need new tricks, but just kind of, I don't know how to put it anywhere, freshening up their sound. And so it was really nice to kind of do that. And then, you know, obviously over the years, still being a Garcia and Grateful Dead nut, I started hearing Garcia playing it. Now, granted, he plays it, I think he plays it out of E, and most of the times it's done out of F. So the original, I think it's there. And it has this lovely little figure that we'll be doing. So I'm playing this kind of a third here. And that's what's happening in the backing track here. You'll hear starts on C sharp, B, C sharp minor, B, E, up to A, whoa, then to B, up to E, and down to A. So we've got this C sharp minor as the first part, to B, again, C sharp minor, right? Third of the E we're over right now. Now let's get up to A. So that last little melody of the maker is taking place over top of the 5 chord. Right now, the 5 is usually reserved, seen as a 7 chord. But the melody here does that great thing that Garcia loves, is while over a dominant chord, he's still kind of clinging to the major pentatonic, and you hear this. So we've got this C sharp minor pentatonic with this kind of bluesy optionality to it, right? And then we've got the B back to E. Again, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, up to A. Infinitum, okay? So we've got this lovely, lovely dramatic melody that we can draw upon. So you must learn the melody, right? Oh, can I see the fishman's daughter? Something like that, I think, right? Something. So that's the third, right? Into the third of the E chord, right? Sorry, we're on the root of the C sharp. Back to B. Black as the night, I'll rise. Right then. Da da da. Just playing the melody sounds so lovely, right? So it's ripe for the picking. There's something going on there, for sure. Like you don't have to necessarily play the melody straight front to back. You've got ample opportunity to kind of hit it and quit it and then go off. And so because you've got these diatonically connected chords, they're all out of E major, right? So we've got this kind of vamp over the E major. C sharp minor. Back to E. Again, so those two chords share the same note set. Just hit that B and then you're good. Now you got your first little drama point, right? You want to play up into the A chord and kind of nail that kind of thing. And there's this little motion that takes place. Climb, pretty important, okay? Jesus Christ. Is it still not back? Still not back? Huh. There we are. I'm so sorry, guys. My apologies. Old habits die hard, I suppose. That's what I get for doing this on my phone. But have no fear. All right. So you can hear there's a tremendous amount of ambience created by this sound, okay? And so I'm on this kind of thick neck pickup sound. So you need to be very certain about what you're doing because you're going to be creating kind of a wash of information. And if that information contains kind of kinky notes in it, it can rub the wrong way, or even like clammy notes, right? Even using the major 7 can sound a little cluttered, right? If we have that. We just have to be really careful about where we do that. Think about that A. massive throw, all right, reverb, and it's kind of a dark, murky reverb. It's actually kind of a deliberate choice. What I'm doing to create the sound, hey, would play on this fretless bass. Yeah, fretless bass is, I believe, what's on the original recording. It's kind of a guy playing like little thirds and doing some really pretty stuff. Actually, so the bulk of the low end on the original track that I recall is handled by like a kick drum, like an 808 kind of sample or some sort of low synth pad. So Daniel's, his raison d'etre is ambience, right? So creating these like kind of acoustic spaces that each of the components of the mix live inside of, and then putting that entire mix into another space so that you have these characters all with their own little aura around them, embedded inside of another larger, like kind of congealed space. Okay, and so consequently most of his work is drenched in some sort of either a profound amount of or a distinct, like conspicuous absence of ambience. So often, in order to create perspective, he'll use the lack of reverb as an effect. And so this creates like a very present and detailed, like upfront presentation. And then to gain depth of field, he'll use the reverb to kind of put things in the background, but keep their levels kind of high in the mix so that they generate these kind of like ripple effect of their sounds. So that's kind of what's happening here. The loop that you're hearing is a two component loop. All right, there's this sound without any overdrive on it. So I had a little bit of overdrive, and so this is what is playing the. You can hear there's some like delay that I'm kind of playing with. That kind of funky kind of driving and allowing the reverb to kind of ping pong around. And then very dry is the bass just kind of going. So I'm taking 1 1 1 2 1 while the guitar is playing 3 3 3 4 3, thus creating this harmony. That when it comes off of the C sharp minor chord. It starts on, I start my loop on the C sharp minor. So there's just two elements going on there. Heaven forbid you add a sensitively played keyboard part and maybe some nice chill drums, something like that. You really have got quite a cake to frost. It's a beautiful, beautiful song, but it does require a certain degree of restraint, okay? And let's talk about that. Let's go back to the solo tone. You may be noticing that this is truly an exercise in dynamic control with the right hand. I'm playing with this kind of thick pick. This is the weapon of choice for latter era Garcia. So there's that one. I have a thicker tortoiseshell one, and you've seen those blue ones that I play oftentimes. Those are really good. You want to have like a nice stiff pick, but then what you need to learn how to do is barely squeeze it to create this. And what ends up happening is there's a natural amount of compression that takes place when there's a little bit of overdrive and volume. You want to make sure you're very loud relative to the backing track so that you deliberately lower your volume sound, your dynamics, so you always have like an upward gear in your back pocket. So while I'm playing, I can be very tasty and quiet. Okay, so we're always keeping tabs on where we are on the accelerator. We really don't want to step on the gas for too long, too hard. We can't really do that. Not with this kind of sound. Okay, so how is this sound attained, right? There's, in any amplifier and kind of pedals kind of situation, we have to think about what they call gain staging. It's one of the more important elements to getting the sound you're after. And there's some general rules that occasionally can be broken, and I am doing that, okay? One, typically we have pedals out in front of a clean power source. That's usually the pedal platform. And then there may or may not be an effects loop in the amp, or potential to add effects in post, right? Like on a mixing console or at the board, you know, something like that live, like somebody can pour on the reverb or something like that. But that's a little difficult for me as a guitar player, because I want to be able to, I don't want to have to communicate with the sound person. I don't want there to be like kind of this communique. I want to just control my rig and make the sound happen. So the cool thing about the Kemper is that it takes into account this whole kind of thing, but in a digital way. So you get 4 slots up front to do stuff to the sound with. And then you get the amp and the cabinet model, effectively. And then in the hindquarters of the section, you effectively get an effects loop kind of section, but it doesn't actually go through the power amp of the rig. But anybody that's ever played high volumes with lots of echo has probably encountered what I'm about to discuss. As you crank up an amp, the power amp becomes more vibrant and alive, and the compression of those tubes is what gives you sustain and to some degree overdrive and some pleasant artifacts, right? But if you are cranking up a lot of reverb and things like that, it can get a little gnarly, right? So distorting long reverbs is generally frowned upon. It's kind of a no-no. Except here, I'm actually doing it deliberately. I've got, in the front end of my amp, I have like a delay that has a lot of like body to it. And I have it right before my overdrive circuit. So I'm effectively distorting the delays deliberately. And what that does is it makes you have to be kind of aware of 2 components of your sound, both the original sound that you're playing and then that first initial hot repeat. That, if I hear that like repeat start to distort aggressively, I know I'm hitting my strings too hard. I'm bottoming out. I'm cranking too hard into the front end of the rig. And so in order to make it so that I don't have to do that, I turn up the master volume of the sound so that at barely, you get this, and what does that do? It brings the volume down of the notes, but leaves the attack that can't really be lowered. So you end up with a much more tactile and immediate kind of whispering in the ear, kind of confessional. Kind of creates that intimacy that we hear when we hear players play with their fingers, like Mark Knopfler, for example. He relies tremendously on that to give that confessional sound to his approach, his playing. Okay, I've got 20 minutes here so I'm kind of going for that. And at the same time, I've found the MXR compressor aids in keeping the delay and the reverb tamed. You mean on the way into into the front end of your amp? It should do that, but really the only real solution is to The only real solution there is to get the reverbs at the end of your signal and keep your amp clean, right? That's the best way. Obviously, smoothing out any huge dynamic peaks is not without consequences. It removes the ability for you to have dynamic peaks. Okay, so there's elements of what I think about. There's compression, which kind of, oh yeah, coffee and Jacksnax. Thanks, dude. Yeah, I already had mine, 3 lattes, I think, and now I'm on to hydration. So speed me up and then purify with bubbles. And so for me, I've decided that I'll compress through kind of like a form of like a mild overdrive, right? But what I don't want to do is actually add an actual compressor until I'm mixing. Then I don't mind keeping the level contained, but what I want to do is have some sort of back and forth with the front end of the amp, kind of a conversation with that device. Because if I'm kind of being if there's a layer of protection between me and the circuit, that kind of puts, it's like a dynamic condom on what is otherwise a very tactile experience, and it kind of removes you from the feeling of interacting with this amp, okay, or whatever, the rig, you know. So you can hear how I'm happy to lean into it briefly to kind of create a wash. All right, and this kind of sound it's still going, these longer tails of reverbs that exceed 2 or 3 seconds, right? And then if there's a delay involved, sometimes the image could persist for, you could be hearing one note for 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5 seconds. Okay, so that makes the need for intonation to be right on. That means everything because your words effectively are lingering in the air for a lot longer, you have to make sure that you're parsing out your speech and very aware. And it's hard to be both spontaneous and considerate at the same time. All right, so that's where that melody really comes in handy, is it gives you a little crutch to fall back on. And you start to find little tropes that you can like kind of repeat, like little slogans, right? So there's that da ba da da da. I'll use that a lot. So when I get to the or that little triplet da, that little, like using those little triplets and things, it kind of gives a certain epic majesty to it, right? I'm not saying my playing is epic or majestic, but that kind of feels triumphant, kind of, seems like something that would be deliberately done. And it is being deliberately done, okay? So you should worry about things like that and your picking pressure if you're going for this kind of deliberately murky ambient sound. Now, I can clean it up, and I have taken some measures to do so. When I first strapped the delay before the distortion device, I realized, there's a lot of bass content in the delays themselves. And those are in effect triggering like a muddiness. And if you give me a second, I can show you what I'm talking about. It's kind of a nice thing to be able to tailor the effect that's going into your distortion. So let's just, I'll hit it kind of hard here. Okay, now if I come back to that delay that's in front of it, and I take the bass down to full spectrum from where it was at 300. That sound gets a little bit more, okay? And then in addition to that, and maybe most importantly, there's this circuit called a ducking circuit. And if you've ever heard me talk about effects before, the ducking is like is a way of creating slight fading in of the effect. So if I do that note again, now you can hear that the effect, the echo is even more profound. It kind of comes up. It kind of gets in the way of the soloing. All right. So if you're not really familiar, sorry for the pause here, I gotta try to line it back up to roughly where it was. So basically what I'm doing is I'm removing the low end content from the delay, and then I'm also making it so that as I hit it, that first one that comes in is kind of suppressed, and then as I stop playing, or if I quiet down to a certain level, it's able to be present. So if I'm going, it's there at full volume, but just not a lot of bass in the delay, so it doesn't get in the way of the sound. And then if I really dig in, it kind of says, easy does it, Tiger. Like it's like a compressor only on the delay. So that way, and I don't hear badu, badu, badu. Right? I don't really want to hear it as profoundly as I would if it wasn't for the ducking. I want more the aftermath to be glowing behind me than competing with the direct attack that I'm going for. Does that make sense to anybody in terms of how to micro dial, like really dial in your effects? Now, this isn't obviously an available feature on every piece of equipment out there. You know, you just slap a memory man in front of your thing, and you either have to decide whether or not you want it to be spacious, but have like this competitive signal that's popping up right after you. Or you can rely on circuits that deliberately roll off low end, right? And you just happen to like the sound of that, which is what I used to do. I had like 4 or 5 different delays on my board. So I had this little tiny, thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment that it sounds good. So the idea is that on my board, I used to have the purple Ibanez analog delay from like the early 70s. Very, very kind of gritchy and weird, like as the delays like regenerate. And the feedback, like you could actually make it feedback and kind of go infinitely. It got very cloudy and it had a wonderful kind of baked in kind of inconsistency about it that made it modulate. It was great sound. So if you ever see one of those old purple Ibanez analog delays, I think Maxon also made one. They were basically the same thing, just rebranded for different markets. And then another Ibanez delay, which was this plastic enclosure called the Sound Tank series, this little tiny thing. It was called an Echo Machine. It was a digital delay, but it had a deliberate roll off. So like rather than adding a bunch of horsepower to make it a lot of fidelity, I guess it was just a cheap delay, but boy, oh boy, it had a great sound. Carbon copy delay has a nice decay like that. Yeah. So there are some, so most delay circuits nowadays feature some way of crafting an EQ curve to the actual response, right? Now that is not the case necessarily with the initial digital delays or some users of delay back in the early 80s. Garcia being chief among them, in my opinion. He did not really seem to tweak out on what the response of the delay was, or maybe he appreciated the extra clarity. Goodness knows the man liked treble. I, on the other hand, prefer crafting that and rounding off the trebles and keeping the attack of my effects out of my initial statement way. I don't like it that I'm here and all of a sudden the delay is right parallel with you in terms of the front to back perspective when I play. I tend to want to lead with what I'm saying and then have like kind of a shimmer behind it. All right, and in this way, I guess I differ from some of my heroes. There isn't even a lot of clarity I'm on the neck pickup on a very mellow sound. I'm not even up. But that snappy sound kind of, when that ends up going into the delay and then into the reverb and then into the more, it just kind of gets to be a little fatiguing for me. So that's really how I'm getting the sound I'm going for. I'm only using a mild amount of, like a slight amount of overdrive. The amp itself would sound like this. And to be honest, by using the overdrive, I'm rounding off the trebles. Listen to the high end here. If I put in the overdrive, kind of rolls it off, but gives it a little boost. I've added some sustain. All right, so there's a little bit more. There's a little bit more give and take. I have like a low gear and a high gear available. But I kind of like the fuzziness of it. It's a little less. There's a little less fidelity, a little bit more kind of vagueness to the delay. All right, but that's a very deliberate choice, just so you know, and it might not be the thing that you want to do. So if you're wondering why it sounds kind of cloudy and murky, that's kind of a deliberate choice, kind of like an impressionistic painting. All right. And so one could clearly say that my approach on the song is more tethered to the Lanois approach, you know, a lot of more effects and rhythmic delays and things like that than Garcia, who's playing the song for the song structure as a platform for improvisation. So I guess we could pivot to talking about that a little bit. And these are kind of like the essential elements of Garcia's approach is this understanding of melody. He's a sucker for, I mean, literally, he has a song called I'll Take a Melody, right? It's just simple stuff, but just really knowing how to drill down into playing the melody. And so it's been my contention that the best way to learn how to play like that guy is to effectively sing through your guitar, right? And that's what I think he's doing. I think he's taking the ideas that he was communicating as the lead vocalist of whatever ensemble he's fronting, and kind of shifting the responsibility from coming out of here to coming out of here. And that's a pretty simple, like, kind of mind swap. You know, if we're talking Freaky Friday, he just kind of starts singing out of this instead of singing out of this. All right. And so that's what you should try to do if you're interested in learning how to approach songs like him. There isn't an awful lot of just raw shredding in this music. It really is less effective than playing the melody. And primarily, I think that's because it cuts down on the conversational abilities between you and other things, which, granted, there isn't much here. Only one time through the progression. And the looper is not going to be dynamic. It's not going to change. So I kind of have to do all the changing here. But if we think about the way Jerry would play duet to Phil's melodic bass lines was amazing. Yes, and to an extent, I don't know how much he's like listening and responding in a conscious way, or just at this point, they understand this kind of, they have a chemical reaction between these two personalities. And that's something that can't be overstated, actually, is just like when you hit it off with somebody that you're romantically attracted to, and it's just like, man, I can't say the wrong thing with this person. Everything is just going so beautifully, and like the conversation is effortless and yet rewarding at the same time. This can happen and between two musicians, and I think that that's something that was special that happened between Phil's mind and Garcia's mind. They were both pretty heady guys when you think about it, even though Garcia doesn't really strike you at first. Captain Trips wasn't exactly that cerebral a dude, in that he was very prepared to just go and have fun, right? It was like a big part of like, what's fun? Let's do that the most. But when you actually hear him talk, it's like, oh shit, a very articulate and vibrant soul. So that kind of curiosity and raw intelligence, he may not have gone to like college and done anything like that, but smart people don't need to go to college to become smart. They're already smart, and they get like a greater level of elocution, perhaps, or maybe a greater specificity about a certain subject, which they could probably pursue on their own. And I think that's kind of, Garcia found professors in the friendships and bandmates that he chose, whether it be Merle Saunders or to some extent Phil Lesh. I don't feel like he really thought he had much to learn from Bob Weir, and for a long time I don't think he really gave Bobby too much. I think he loved him and cared about him, but I don't think he looked at him quite with the same respect that he did after you started to hear Bob's style emerging in the early 70s. And at that point, I think that Garcia probably realized that he had something special in his wingman. I mean, truly amazing the way those two guys played off of each other. Certainly more of a big brother little brother thing than the he and Phil connection, where I feel like the two of them approached each other as peers musically in a different in a weird way. I think Garcia respected Phil's compositional and orchestral background in a way that he obviously didn't have that ability because he had taught Bob Weir. So there is already like an apprentice mentor kind of situation there. And I don't think he was like an abusive guy necessarily, but they did fire him. They did fire him. He just kept coming to work. All right, so there isn't too much more to say about this other than learn the melody. And this is a great case in point for it's a diatonic song, so we can basically just have fun right in here. Right? We could just start there, right? Sliding into those little melodies, right? So I mean, I know what I'm doing. Other than I got to teach at 11 o'clock, but otherwise, I'm gonna have some fun with that motherfucker. That is just a gem of a progression. And if you don't know how to squeeze the juice out of that berry, it is a beautiful, beautiful problem to have to solve. That is a fun assignment for any student of mine. Like, hey, fuck around with this because it's pretty forgiving. Provided you can, if you can feather your nest with a nice little loop like that, good stuff, all right? Now, I would be remiss if I wasn't here to plug what's coming up for any and all who are interested in learning from me. These kinds of office hours, I'm not threatening. I'm actually trying to provide up until the last minute sort of a legacy here on the YouTube platform for anybody that's interested in this kind of stuff, having more and more and more access to these kinds of lessons. I'm shifting my business model over to actually having a business rather than just going online and spewing everything I've managed to learn over the course of 45 years out into the ether for free. There's just enough demand at this point for people to study with me, and I thought it would be cool to set up an opportunity for folks to attend like a weekly seminar that has like breakout rooms and all kinds of stuff. It's a full arc. All of that's going to get recorded, stored someplace. Your membership to the school will ensure that you can access that stuff infinitely, along with tabs. There's going to be, according to like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. There's some little contesty stuff that you don't have to be part of if you don't want to. Some homework that hopefully you should be doing. And access to me, a couple of live streams a week, a master class. There's an optional Jerry Garcia course that one can take. There's a beginner's course. There's going to be some interesting little doodads and add-ons that you can do for approaching snack school. And you should be in like a one-stop shop for both with interviews, discussions about gear, tone, how to work certain amps. I've got a nice amp collection, guitar collections. This thing could keep going, and then obviously interviews with people and friends of mine throughout the years that I have already agreed to like get involved in and come either via a Zoom call, guest lecturers, professors, and things like that could hopefully shine a light on some things that might be not necessarily my strong suits. And so the idea is, if you're interested in studying the guitar, I think there are far less equipped people that are out there doing this, who care less about you, actually. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going for it. And if you guys want to come along, I would be oh so glad. If you're interested, drop me a line, tell me you're interested, shoot me your email, or you can write me an email at jack_divine@hotmail.com. Just put snack school in the RE line, and that way I can keep an organized list of who is interested, and when things are ready to go in a couple of weeks, we can actually just make the jump. All right, I'm currently contacting like transcriptionists to transcribe the bulk of the work that already is here on YouTube for tablature and have it embedded in the bottom of the screens. So we should be, if you're interested in, say, some of the content that I already put out, but you don't have to buy the tabs anymore. It'll just be right there, and it should be for a lot of people. It could be a really nice break from not having a guitar. It's like not quite a private student, but like not just like some guy who's out on the internet and you kind of have to catch him as catch can. Sounds great. You'll look up my web page for the email. I don't have a web page. You just email me and I will contact you. It's going to be done through that platform called School, which is kind of like a Patreon kind of thing, but it's meant for communities. And the good news is, therefore, you'd also have like a members board where you can meet other people that are interested in this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, there's some nice stuff going on. Now, I'm already late for my 11 o'clock, but I wanted to come on board and share with you the ideas behind the maker, and Jack _ not hyphen, not hyphen, Jack _divine at hotmail.com, DEVINE at Hotmail. Like, who has a Hotmail address? I do. That's how out of it I am tech wise. That said, when the school gets up and running, it'll be done through. I'll probably end up having to get like a Gmail kind of thing. So I'm gonna sign off for now and go back. I've got to turn around here and do a private lesson, and that'll be that. All right. Stay cool if you're in the New York area. It's gonna be in the upper 90s today. All right. Stay inside. Don't be a hero. All right. Take care, everybody. Much love. Play guitar, and I'll talk to you soon. School. Do it. Later.